Miss Pat Woelk, we want to thank you for granting us this interview on the history of this house, the John H. Sams house, and your relationship with the family and this particular piece of property. And we'd like to start the interview by having you tell us how your family came to be in Brevard County, where they came from, and how is it they actually came to settle here. If you could talk a little bit about that, please.
The story that's always been told to me was that after the Civil War, which was in the early 70s, and they were having a very hard time. They had lost almost everything. They didn't have any much property left. They didn't have any workers left, and no money either. And some of my LaRoche uncles and my grandfather decided that they were going to come to Florida and try out something different. And they came down to what they call the Narrows, which is down near Vero Beach. And at that time, my great-grandfather, LaRoche, his second wife, was my great-grandfather Sam's sister.
Now, what was his first name? Do you recall?
James.
James.
That's James LaRoche. And he did not come then, but he came later. And so I think that you probably read my grandmother's story, and that's the same story that I know, is that they were having a farewell dinner for my great-grandfather LaRoche and his wife and the youngest of the children that had not come down. And they made the decision later that night that they would pool together what they had and they would come down also. So within a couple of months they did. Although when the Samses came down, they came down to a place north of O'Galley. She said it was about a mile north, and I'm never sure whether it was
Horse Creek
or not, but it always sounded like that was what it was to me. And so they settled there, and when they came there, I'll have to back up a minute because my great-grandfather's younger brother, Seabrook Sams, came down with the LaRoche boys. And he and some of the LaRoche boys built this old house in O'Galley, so that when they came down, the house was framed in and ready to live in.
Do you know where the lumber came for that house?
No.
No?
Mm-mm. Except it probably didn't come from very far. Wasn't there a lumber mill in Melbourne or something
Much
at
later.
that time? It was
Much later, yeah.
So I don't really know.
There may have been one at Titusville
Yeah.
at that period of time. But most of the houses, I think, came from either Daytona or Palatka.
Uh-huh. But anyway, they tried to plant there, and of course, Florida's gardening is backwards to everybody else's because we have warm winters and terrible summers. So they didn't do very well, and my great-grandfather said you couldn't grow cowpeas on that land. It was so bad, and if you couldn't grow cowpeas, it was really bad. So they had a little boat, and they, found this place, this area, and it just looked like John's Island. It had tall trees, and it made them think of home. My Uncle Seabrook took out a homestead just to the south of us here, and then they made the decision to move up here.
Do you know what they grew? They were planters in South Carolina? Do you know?
I think that mostly they grew rice and indigo.
Indigo.
They grew a lot of indigo.
Do you think they may have tried to do that here, or did they just go in?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I think that they were, first of all, they were just trying to feed themselves. And then I think that oranges were coming about, so they decided to get into that, I believe.
Now, you said that the old Sam's house behind us here was built in O'Galley.
Yes.
How did it come to be on this particular piece of property? And is this known as Pine Island here? It is not.
No, this is not. This is the mainland. Pine Island is on the other side of the creek over there.
But it's near Pine Island.
It is near Pine Island.
On North Merritt Island. On the western shore.
Western shore, yes.
So how did the house come to be here?
Well, they had the house, and I always heard that they dropped the sides in and the roof down and barged it up and used the floor for the barge.
Oh.
You know, but when you look at the house close up, there are cuts in the lumber that doesn't exactly go with that story. So I don't really know what they did, except that I do know that they barged it up, and I think they used it for a barge, probably, to get it up here and set it up, and then the family moved on up into it.
Do you know how much land they had here originally?
I think it was the full, when they homesteaded, the full thing.
Full 160 acres, quarter
It may have
section,
been. But I'm not positive on that, but I'm sure they would have.
Now a second house was built, but that was built much later. Do you
Yeah,
know
this is the second house. That's the new part.
the new part?
The new part was built in, I think, oh dear, I always get confused on this one. I believe it was right around 1890, but it was before 1900.
Yes, I
It
checked.
may have been in the 80s, but I'm not positive.
Is that early? But around 1890, you
Yeah,
think?
by then I'm sure it was
Okay.
built.
And what did they do with the old house when they moved into the new house?
They kept using it.
For what purpose?
Well, I guess they used it for bedrooms. There were 3 rooms in the house. And there was the middle room, which was the parlor, the dining room, whatever, I'm not sure. They had a building off, away from it, several feet, for a kitchen.
A
And
separate building?
Yes, which I think was probably fairly traditional too for wood frame houses. And they may have used that as a dining room too.
Was that building still in existence in your lifetime?
No. I just heard about it.
Now, John Sams, it's John Hanahan Sams?
Yes.
Now, he was also school superintendent
Yes,
in the early days?
yes, he was not the very first one, but he was, from what I understand, the first effective superintendent. And he remained on that for about 25 years.
Was he involved in any other politics or other...
Well, he was a, I guess, politically active person, and so he was always, trying to get roads built and this done and that done. He never, I don't think he ever ran for any public office, but he was interested in the education. So, and at that time, Brevard County was a lot farther south, so he would go on horseback and boat, and however, and be gone quite a while on his tour of the schools.
And what about his wife?
They were very Victorian. She was
Very Victorian?
yes. However, she was raised in a wealthy family, and she had her own little handmaiden. So if she was sewing and dropped her needle, that little girl was there. But that little girl loved her very, very much. But anyway, and she taught her how to read and do things like that. But she came down here, or after the war, probably still in South Carolina, and had to do everything herself.
That must have been hard on her, having a...
And so she had to, she was young enough, I think, because she got married in, I think it was 1863, during the war. And so she was fairly young at that time. But she certainly was flexible enough that she learned how to work, to do everything, to make candles. They used to take the wax myrtle berries and make candles out of those. They always had a little kitchen garden, and she would, planted the beans and picked them and everything else, and taught children literature while she was doing it.
And how many children did they have?
8 altogether.
8. Did they all stay in this area, or they scatter out, do you think?
Later they did. Most of them stayed in this area. One of them married in this area, but she ended up living in Central Florida, the youngest woman of the girls.
Do you know some
One
of the
lived in
names?
Jacksonville.
Some of the names that they might be related today?
There were the one that moved to the Central Florida area. Her name was Addie B. Adelaide Elizabeth. She married Fred Black, and he had been. You'll find him in some of the records here across the river. In fact, she lived across the river for a long time.
His father was a reverend, I think?
I don't think so.
No?
Not that one. No. I doubt seriously that that was the case, yeah.
And what line are you descended from?
John Sams
John?
and his wife Sarah Sams, who was a third or fourth cousin of my great-grandfather. He was from a generation before her, but they all had big families then. And then my grandmother was the oldest of the Sams children.
Okay. And who did she marry?
She married Ben LaRoche.
Okay.
He was about third down, I think, third oldest in the LaRoche boys.
And they settled just north of this piece of
Yes,
property?
they did. That's where they ended up. And my great-grandfather gave, as the children got married, gave them, or grew up, he gave them strips of land so that they were
Out of the original homestead?
out of the original homestead.
Do you know about what time maybe that they moved to that piece of property north of here?
Before this house was built,
Before 1900?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because her oldest daughter was born in 1882 or 4. Can't remember which name. She was 16 when she got married.
Now, which of their children were you descended from?
The youngest, and her name was Celestine.
Celestine?
Yes.
And who did she marry?
She married, his name was Robert Dingman, and he had relatives in Rockledge that she met.
And that was your father and
That was
mother?
my father, yes.
And what, were they grove owners too? What was their...
Yeah, my grandfather had the orange, he tended orange groves. That's what they had there. That's what everybody had here, only they were really pretty then. Well kept and nice.
What about pineapples? Were they ever into any other crops?
Yes, but I don't think, they probably, what they did was they started at the house and moved out, planting things. There were pineapples, I understand a large number of pineapples were grown between here and about a half mile south. And whatever happened, whether they were frozen or a blight or whatever, I don't know. But they also, my great-grandfather had some property on the south end of the island at Lotus. And I think they tried to grow them there too.
We understand from the eel people
Yeah.
that now are managing this property that they found a pineapple patch on the north end of the property here. And we were wondering if that was, if you had any knowledge of that particular patch. No?
Not a bit.
Okay, there's still some growing wild apparently.
I don't know. I'd never seen any.
Okay. What did they do for like recreation in this area? Was there any?
Not very much. In the first place, you didn't. Yeah, Fritz says they're fish, but they also fish to eat. But they had parties that, neighborhood parties, and I always remember my grandmother talking about going down to the May Day picnics on Oleander Point, which you know where that is in Cocoa. And she said sometimes the weather didn't cooperate and they had to spend the night instead of coming home. But
That was a big celebration
yeah,
for the
that
whole
was- river.
Now, what about sugar cane? A lot of people planted sugar cane.
Yes,
Had,
they did.
cane
And
parties.
the LaRoches and the Samses together had a lumber mill, and they also had a sugar cane out away, more in the middle, out where the Crisfillies are living now,
of the island.
where the Crisfillies were living, out Crisfilly Road, because they
No.
own that property too.
No, is that where the mill was? The lumber mill?
As far as I know, it was.
And did the mill have a name?
Not that I know of. It probably was the LaRoches or whatever, I don't know. Because all that was gone by the time I came along.
Do you think that's where they got the lumber for the second house?
There's a remote possibility they could have, but I don't know. This is pretty well finished lumber in there, and I doubt if they did anything that finished.
Okay.
So the beaded boarding, somewhere Pensacola, but I don't know why. That name just popped in my mind. That it might have come from Northwest Florida. So I don't know.
What about the religious community? What was there a
They were
local church?
Episcopalians. There was no church, but my great-grandfather saw to it that they were schooled in it. They had morning prayer every morning and evening prayer every night, and you better be there and you better sit quietly. So what my mother's only sister, and the oldest one was that they always got her going to school, because the school was down this way on the Seabrooks property, and she always got here just in time and had to sit and behave herself too. So
What was your diet? What do you think their diet was like, and what was your diet like in the early days?
well, mine was very general, just what we eat now, just about.
But you had refrigeration.
Somewhat, yeah, we had ice boxes. But we also had a garden. My grandfather he never really grew vegetables for the market, but he always said that he was just, well, this year I'm just going to grow enough for the family. However, he supplied the whole neighborhood and sold some too.
What sort of things?
Just anything, potatoes, tomatoes, okra, whatever. He planted it, he grew. He had a dirty brown thumb because he was busy gardening, and he was very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So he, we always had fresh vegetables, and what it wasn't fresh, they canned. We had chickens. We tried turkeys, but the stupid things were always drowning themselves. So that didn't work. I had ducks, which I gave proper names to, like Nicodemus and things like that. And I'd cry all Saturday afternoon if they were going to eat one on Sunday, but Sunday it didn't look the same. So it tasted just as good. Usually we went to town on Saturday, and that was most of the day. Did the shopping, so we would have fresh meat on Sunday, whether it was chicken or roast beef or whatever, and bring the ice home too for it. So this house, they wired for electricity in the REA program. We never had it next door.
Was that in the 30s?
Yes, that's in the 30s. Probably about 34, 35 that they brought it up here.
Did they do, you said they fished some?
Yeah, mainly that they did it for recreation and also to get the food.
What about shellfish? Were there shellfish here?
There were, but I never heard them talking about eating the shellfish at all. There were mussels out there and clams, but they never ate them. And then in the winter, of course, they'd have coot and duck.
They hunted.
Yeah. They never ate the wild animals while I was, and I'd never heard of them eating them.
As far as deer, you mean?
Yeah, well, yes, if they could get a deer, they got a deer.
Oh, okay.
Which they did on occasion, then that was big celebration time. But they didn't eat possums and coons and the birds that were here.
What about alligators?
Don't think so. They probably got rid of a few, but they didn't eat them. So.
When you're right on the edge of the NASA property here, when the Cape came in and NASA, were you affected? Was your family affected by that at all?
Well, I think probably more in a social sense, and maybe in an economic sense too, because that gave Fred work to do.
That's your husband.
Yes, and he did floor covering, and there was a very slow progress. So there was a mini boom during World War II when Patrick, which was in Banana River, opened up, and a lot of people moved in here. But mainly they must be barbecuing or something. Mainly they it was just the amount numbers of people that came in. And to give you a small example, when they went to rural routes in the 30s, when they closed up all the local post offices, this place was box 33. The next time they did it was box 300.
Wow.
Which meant north of the 520. So it grew.
Right. Imagine how many were built.
Yes.
What about weather extremes in your lifetime, and any stories that your family may have told? You had mentioned something about one of the reasons they moved the old house here was because of the hurricanes and the wet weather?
Yeah, well, that was the story about why it was built up on this ridge, was because everything was flooded. it didn't take a tremendous amount of rain for that low spot to fill up there. And there's that low spot runs all the way through that way too.
Were there many hurricanes?
I remember very few. But and that old house stood up under it. This old house stood up under them without any real damage to them either. The freezes, it seems, I think, probably more memorable to me than anything because these houses were cold. They were built for warm weather, up off the ground, and so that cold wind would come blowing through, and you could have frozen things on the floor.
What's the coldest you can recall in your lifetime?
I remember it was down in the high teens.
High teens?
And there was ice, and we've had frozen water pipes in this house.
What about the Grove? Did the Grove suffer?
The 94-95 freeze, that you were talking about weather extremes. They'd had a freeze, and 6 weeks later they had the second freeze, which is what really wiped things out because everything sprouted in between times. But the story was always that my grandmother and grandfather went to bed that night covered with nothing but a sheet. And they woke up the next morning with one of my uncles beating on the door. Why are they asleep when there was ice everywhere? The trees, you could hear them cracking as they froze.
Wow.
So overnight, it went from warm weather to the freezing weather, and that's what wiped out so many of the trees. So then, in a sense, they did have to start over then.
So they had to start over as far as the Grove.
Right. So very few trees surviving. In fact, my grandfather LaRoche took his family and went to South Carolina and tried it back there for a while, but then they came back. So.
What's the highest water you can recall as far as any flooding that may have happened in this area?
Well, it came up within about 10 to 15 feet from the west side of the house.
To the west side of the house?
But it didn't stay there that long.
Was that Hurricane Donna? There was a lot of rain.
Oh, there was always, but all you could take was a good rainstorm some days.
Really?
It just depended on, how wet the ground was, I guess, and how much water was going to absorb.
What was it like as far as the peak of the orange growing area? Was this all orange groves,
Yes.
North Merritt Island?
Yes.
Most of them gone now?
Most of them are gone or look like this.
What were some of the other citrus families that were up here in this area?
Well, all the relatives were involved in it, and then probably just about anybody that moved in here had a citrus grove of some sort. And, in the older times, a small citrus grove could support a family. But then it got so that it was impossible. So that's when they just tried to keep going, but there's just a point of no return.
So you actually ran the grove here for a long time when you first?
It was still a grove when we moved here. Yes. I guess it was probably within it wasn't but about 10 years we'd been married, was it, before? So we were living here, but we didn't own the property. But it was owned by my mother and her cousin.
Oh.
And we lived here, and we took care of things, but we weren't responsible for the grove. But by the mid-70s, anyway, grove owning was
not economically worth it.
No. Just the whole process about it, I think, was...
I want to get back to the food.
Okay. All right, what did the family eat? They ate a lot of swamp cabbage.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
How did they prepare it?
They either made it into slaw or they boiled it.
With anything?
Usually with some fat back or something. Fat pork.
With no beans or sweet potatoes in it?
No, just plain cabbage. I never ate it with anything in it besides some seasoning. They grew most of what they ate. They had to buy, they would go to Titusville and get their supplies, and then flour and sugar in large quantities, and then hope the weevils didn't get in the flour. They did do their own baking. Other than growing them, it was just normal. They had pigs. Not when I came along, but they had pigs before. They had a milk cow, usually. And that's about I don't know whether, they didn't raise cattle. They had a milk cow and a horse to do their work and get where they were going.
And they had cars in the,
They had cars, and as soon as they started getting cars, they
okay.
were getting cars. So
What types of transportation did they have in the early days?
boats,
Boats?
sailboats, and launches, and we always had little boats when I grew up. We had a rowboat just to paddle around in.
Is
little
that-
things. But and a couple of them were captain. That, you know, they knew what they were doing. They ran big boats.
Did they have to pack the oranges and ship them to Tallahassee or Titusville to?
Well, they took them down to the river, and somebody picked them up. I don't know where they went from there.
But there was a packing house.
But there was a packing house here on the property,
Uh-huh.
which was torn down when I was a child.
So they had sailboats and any steamboats? Do you know?
I don't know, not steamboats, but they had motor launches. I know that later.
Motor launches.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that they had horses.
They had a horse or two. They didn't. They were mainly for work and to pull the cart because they had a horse and buggy.
Mm-hmm.
Their transportation primarily.
But they didn't really use them for pleasure. It was more
No.
for work.
Mm-hmm.
Any mules?
Probably, but I don't know.
Right.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Actually, used it for a workshop.
One room out of two.
Yes.
And then they built a platform up top out of the wall, so
Yeah,
that
we
wood's
saw
still
that.
there.
We saw that platform.
Yeah.
But see how the wood comes all the way down there? We
Yes.
thought that maybe there were two separate buildings with a.
I don't know why that's cut. This is what I told you. It's a mystery to
Yeah.
me because it just doesn't make a lot of sense with what I was told to begin with. So I don't know why they cut it because it's definitely a cut there. All the way down. I think there's one on the other side too.
Maybe it was out when they moved it. They might have had to cut it in half
You
to
told
move
me
it.
They
when
have.
I first got married, they moved in 3 different sections
I did.
and put it back together again.
Brooksy
That's
told
why
you
they
that?
cut us all the way through there.
Yeah, but I'd heard also, Fred, that it dealt with the walls coming and the
Falling
roof,
down.
lowering the roof and pushing in the walls.
This is the old part of the Sams house. The tin roof that wasn't original from.
No, there
the
were wood
1870s.
shingles, I believe.
Wood shingles,
Cedar shingles probably. or
probably
wood.
cedar or cypress.
Mhm.
You know when the tin roof was put on?
No.
So that was before
That-
your time.
Before my time.
Okay. You said that the house stood on wood piles, wood
Yes.
pilings,
Yeah, pine trunks.
pine trunks. Okay.
Stumps.
And you believe those were original,
Hmm.
and you all replaced them with what?
With concrete blocks because the termites were destroying everything.
We're getting into it.
you know.
And the time that you owned the house and lived here, the rooms were used for.
Not much.
Not much. A workshop.
I always called them the company rooms. When company was coming, you'd put everything back there you didn't want to deal with right then. It was mostly for storage. Now there were things that were still left in there that had been there for years. And then the water system was at the other end.
We noticed some fixtures in the inside that looked like they might be gas.
Acetylene gas.
Is that what it was?
And that was gone before my time too, except I know about it.
Okay.
That they had acetylene gas for
Acetylene
lights.
gas. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you know what the? You said there was a cistern for the
Mhm.
house
That's right back through there. We can see that later where it was.
on the north.
North side,
Side
right
of the
just outside
house.
of the kitchen there. Which we still were using until one day Fred looked in it and decided we weren't going to use that anymore. Never look in a cistern.
Now, when you moved into the newer part of the house, you remodeled the kitchen or you added the kitchen?
No, the kitchen was there, it was existing, and apparently it had been a wraparound porch. And they closed it off and made that in the kitchen. So that was the kitchen when I grew up. And there was, before the electricity, they had a wood stove, which drafted into the chimney, and then they had a kerosene stove they used in the summer, which is what we did at our house next door.
Now, you said the kitchen was in a closed-in porch.
Mhm.
Do you think, so it wasn't originally built as part of the house?
I'm sure they were still using the outdoor kitchen
The old one.
when they first built this house.
So it was
So it
subsequent.
was after that they did.
Maybe after John Sams died,
No, because he died in 24.
24.
It was before then.
Before then.
Yeah.
We were looking at this porch too, and it looked from the inside that originally there was just a very tiny porch over the two front doors, and that this porch was added on later.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, it was closed in. I remember when it was closed in the 30s. But the porch was always long and huge.
It was always there?
Yeah. And now we had to replace parts of it, which may be why you're thinking it was very narrow
Okay.
or very small. But this is the way I always knew it, with these very wide steps. But it was closed in later.
But it wasn't screened in originally?
Mm-mm.
And there were screen doors
There
on
were screen doors and screen windows on every door and every window of it. And they were still there even after they screened in the porch, because up until the Navy started spraying, you just would get carried away with mosquitoes here.
Okay.
Still can on occasion.
The shingles on the newer house, those are original from when it was built? you
The
think?
metal shingles, I don't know.
As far as you know, they're original?
That's all I remember were the metal shingles
Okay.
there. And I think they might have been on the porch, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. I just remember it from a child and seeing that was here and had been here all along. And they used to do things with it, but I don't know. Those little things, the cones down there, what do they do with those?
Well, the Indians made flour.
That's right.
Now, what did you call it?
A coontie fern.
Cootie fern. And it was here, you think, when the
Yes,
Sams
that's
first
what I've
settled
always
this
heard.
property.
But it was there. I'm just having fun with an ant right now. That's it.
And this avocado tree?
No, that was bearing when I was little, but there was one there and one here. There's the stump from it, and one up there. The freezes killed most of those, and drought.
What about the magnolias? Where did
They were right
stand?
here, right here. Dig down here, you'll probably run into some hard old roots from it.
And the grove was here and went all around the house?
Yes.
So
They
the
planted
house,
very close to the house.
the house stood in the middle of the
Mhm.
grove. And where was the kitchen garden?
I don't know.
But
It'd have been close to the house, or maybe down that way.
in your time, you said you grew in the wet.
Oh yeah, we did down here.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's walk around the north side of the house.
And we planted that line. You see a huge mango there. Look where it's sunk down, Fred.
Yeah,
That was a mango?
Yeah.
big
A baby
thing.
mango, and it couldn't take the cold either.
What other types of fruit did you have? Any like key limes or?
Well, that was later. They had kumquat. They didn't have much of anything except the oranges and grapes that could sell. We have hickories now everywhere, and oak trees. And as far as I know, the old kitchen was right out here, in this area. There also, when I grew up, there were guavas here. And those have gotten killed off too.
Did they can those?
Oh yes, made jelly, sold it. People on the river. And they made straw hats out of palmetto.
So in your lifetime, you've never done anything to the old house but put the blocks, replace
Yeah.
the pilings?
Oh, I placed some of the siding.
Yeah, you did have to
Yeah, a
do
lot
that
of siding and
sometimes.
stuff on screen several times.
What about the sills? I noticed that there's a gap between the floor joists and the sills. Were they replaced?
I don't think
Underneath?
I
so.
might have done one of these. I think I did this one.
But not underneath?
No. But I did put some rafters across.
Yes.
I
Underneath,
did
yeah.
that.
Right. Level it out.
Well, yeah, it's to give it some more support because it was given away.
I remember when this tree came up.
What about this hole that's over here? Do you know what that was?
Yeah, that was one of Florida's finest. Those little gopher turtles.
That was a gopher turtle?
Yeah. Or they called them box critters.
Now, was there a trash pit or like a burning barrel
I had a burning barrel right down, we did, but the trash was, they used to dump down there.
Near the river or in the
Not that
slough?
far, just near the edge. No, not in the slough, on the other side.
The other
Where you
side.
can't really tell now where the other side is, can you?
Were those concrete foundations?
It's on the other side of that.
And was that a like a barn or a?
That was a barn
For a tractor?
for
or-
tractors and spray rigs and all that equipment
Do you have any idea when that was built?
in the early 30s.
Early 30s? And the packing
Yeah.
house was south of that?
Yes, the packing house was right through there, where the trash stuff is grown up, the
Okay.
Brazilian peppers. And that was torn down. There was another little car garage over there.
A car garage?
Mm-hmm.
Where was the road go around the slough?
Well, yes, if you go down that way or around that way.
Okay,
Or down. This is where the cistern was.
right here,
Yeah, and it fit up underneath there.
underneath.
Yeah, and most of it's down there now. So if you start digging down there, you're going to find
Was it brick or concrete?
concrete. And
Brick on
brick.
concrete.
brick too?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
out of brick.
And
The line right there is where they ended up.
And most of what we did, we were getting ready to do a big deck around here when they sold the property, and so that was the end of that.
And these pilings under the main house were replaced in the 30s?
In
you
the early
think?
30s, yeah.
And they were wood piles too?
They were pine. And I still think there's one right by the steps, but I don't think you pulled out the one, did you?
Then
I think there's one up under by the front steps, Fred. Not sure.
Was anything done upstairs in the old house? Was there a loft or anything?
I don't know.
Okay.
There must have been, there, I don't know. But we tried to keep the squirrels lived in there for a while.
Oh, is that why the
Yeah.
screen and the metal patches?
Yeah, probably a snake or two.
if you ever come by the house or something, you can get a picture of the original stump that was underneath here.
Yeah, we'd like to
You
do
might
that.
want to do that.
Right, that and
See some pictures.
the picture of your
And this was
painting
our-
of your grandfather
I don't know why that washed out the way it did. But it did.
from the gutter above there.
Yeah, this is, and it's took off.
No, we had, you see, my uncle, the last of my uncles, closed off this end of the kitchen and made a bathroom out of it. So
Was
we wouldn't
there-
have to go upstairs all day.
Was there any, there was only one bathroom upstairs?
Yeah.
Was there ever an outhouse in your
Oh,
memory?
yeah, down there.
They had to go that far, or
Yep.
that was a separate,
It was, the outhouse was down that far. It was,
by the
Okay.
shed?
yep. It was a good half a block away.
Really?
And this porch, there was a porch here, so that they could have the privacy of going down there and not knowing where everybody was going, I guess. And
So, well, they had night jars,
oh, yes.
but in the,
I've got a couple of those I'll bring back too.
okay.
Still around. That,
Now, you had an oil furnace at one time?
yes.
Was that for cooking or just for
No,
heating?
that was just for heating.
Just for heating.
Hmm.
So now your uncle, you said, closed in this part of the porch?
Well, no, it was closed in. We closed it off from the kitchen and made a bathroom out of it.
But it had been part of the kitchen?
It had been part of the kitchen. In fact, well, this is the washing machine was down here.
Okay.
Back, back those big old ones. And what was that electric motor? Do you remember what that motor is, Fred?
Pardon?
That motor?
I'm not sure.
It looks like the
Now, where was the well that, in your time,
back over there, where those pipes are. And then the
where the cistern is, you mean?
no, further down near the end of that house.
Okay, there's a well there today,
Yeah,
and you put
It was-
that one in?
yeah, but it doesn't go straight down. It goes down and over now, because it's out there, about 10 or 15 feet away from the house.
Oh, okay, that's where it actually goes
and that's
down.
where the good one is. And I
It might have
can't-
been off a hotel or something.
The big piece of concrete down there, I think, was where the original washing machine motor lived.
Now, what about septic tanks today?
Here,
And you had that put in?
no, they wouldn't. They'd had that was all in.
Two
it.
of them, I don't
It's a
know.
very large
Two of
septic tank too.
I wanted to ask you about the
But
yellow.
here's that smaller one right here. No, that's not either.
Yeah,
Is that
somewhere not real close together.
is that it, Fred?
No, that's a big old stump, isn't it?
Isn't that part of it? We didn't take the whole thing,
That's
did
about
we?
us a stump right there.
Oh, right there. That was
Yeah.
one of the pilings to the house?
It might have been.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Now these are from that tree right here. No,
What vine
What's
is that with
that?
the yellow flowers on it?
a yellow thumbergia, all I know.
Ah,
it's called.
Thumbergia, okay.
Yeah, and it's all over everywhere,
Beautiful.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And what about this tree here?
The monkey puzzle tree, it's dead.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those. It's what is the name of that?
Monkey puzzle? No? Xanthia.
It's one of these common things that are around here that
Kind of elm?
just grow up and get in your way. Hello there, butterfly. Zebra. That's nice to see. The butterflies are still there. I don't know what all these stumps are, except this is what was under the house, I think.
Were there any other outbuildings besides the packing
See
house,
the packing house,
the
little
garage,
garage.
the outhouse? No other tool sheds or,
No, they kept the tools in the barn.
okay.
Wasn't there a big tree over here one time that collapsed? And I think
Fred,
that's
this
what,
was it.
and
What is
that
this
might
thing?
be
I
part
can't
of the
remember.
wood.
There's ants right here.
I don't know what
Go
that
on.
is, Fred. I really don't.
What's the funniest thing that ever happened out here?
Oh dear. I don't know.
That you can talk about.
I don't know. Can't think. Is the armadillo still around?
This looks like part of the stump right here.
It does. Okay, that I think is
That piece is.
because we cut that much off of it, and that thing went way down in the
half
ground.
of it and the whole rest in there.
What time frame did you do that?
Pardon?
What
That was
time
about
frame?
a year or so before we moved, wasn't it?
So in the
We took that,
50s?
changed that 67, 90s. We changed that out.
In the 90s. Okay.
No, yeah.
Oh, my poor old thing finally bit the dust. Yes.
What was that?
Wisteria.
Oh,
Must have gotten pruned one time too many, I don't know.
What about
What's
this cable under the house? Was
Where'd you find that, Fred?
I think that was there.
You didn't run it down in the barn or something?
Yeah, I might have pulled it up and helped pull out those pilings, those wood pilings, and we put it on the back of the truck and jerked it out.
okay.
After I dug a big hole. That wasn't easy. Those things went down maybe
Right.
4 feet or more.
Really?
Yes, sir.
These cedar trees are native. You
But
don't-
yeah, I brought this one up from the river when it was about that high. That would have been in the late 50s.
did you use the hickory nuts for anything?
Just ate them. They used to.
Squirrels liked them.
Yeah, the squirrels loved them.
You ate them too, though?
Yeah, they're awfully hard to fix.
What did you do? How did you do that?
Yeah, they used to make bread with them. Hickory, like you make pecan bread and nut bread. So they'd make hickory bread. I just enjoyed them once in a while.
Did you roast them? Is that how you?
No, we just ate them raw. We hammered them and
Good.
picked them out and ate them, but that's a lot of hard work. Very hard. Is he still in ants? He's still in ants. They love you. Like they do me. Though, in fact, there was an orange tree right in here, I think, at one time. But they planted right up to the house. So, make the best of all this. And I'm still amazed at all that you found out there. How far down did you have to go to find that stuff?
it was within,
100 centimeters.
we found pottery 20 centimeters,
Just over here now.
Wow.
Go deeper than that.
but we found it deeper, but that's
Near the
from
surface.
as close as 20 centimeters all the way down to 1 meter.
What's this here?
That looks like weed blocks.
Oh,
Yeah. Stuff is really gone crazy. A little while, there was also a very large jacaranda tree here. There was a hickory tree here at one time. And one of the storms, I think about 49 or 50, crashed into that window. They broke that window and had to replace that one. But then we had a jacaranda there that didn't like the cold weather. And ended up with the oak tree just coming up and going.
now there was a settling in the old house. Did they ever have that in the new house? for lights that you know of?
Yeah,
They did? Both houses?
yeah, and then they used that track for the electricity. You can still see it in the hallway part where you go upstairs,
Mhm.
where it was, because there's no light there.
And you said there was a bathroom upstairs. How did they
They
get the
converted
water?
the bedroom into a bathroom.
How did they get the water up there? Was there artesian?
We had a windmill.
The windmill?
Yeah, they had a windmill when I grew up. Now what they did before that, I don't know.
It would raise water
In
up
fact,
that
I think
high?
that might have been, I think they put that bathroom in the late 20s,
Late 20s.
about the time they put the windmill in.
Were there any other wells dug around for the groves?
There
Yeah,
was
there
an
was an
artesian
artesian
well
well further
out-
down.
right out here that was
Yeah.
one, but they blocked that up because it kept,
County did it.
the county or the
County gone.
the
Yes.
St. John's
water, St. John's, I
Management.
think,
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.